Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It is 11 o'clock now. My name is Buffy Sisk. I'm the Associate Director for Online and Transfer Recruitment, and this is the Go Global session. And Mark Hagan is going to provide the presentation, and I'm going to be available throughout the session to answer your questions via chat. So feel free to chat any questions that you may have as we go. Thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited to have everyone. So Mark, whenever you're ready.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining the session this morning. I'd like to briefly introduce a special guest of mine. I'm going to put her on the spot. It's my daughter, Kristen. We had a staff member who was supposed to present and had an emergency. And so I had to kind of put things together at the last minute. I think it's going to be fine because I love talking about this and talk about this all the time. But Kristen, I guess I brought her up right. She actually wanted to do a study abroad herself. So she's going to provide the student perspective when we get to that point. I like to do these kind of informally. So if you have questions, probably the best thing to do, because it's Zoom, is to send a chat, and Buffy will watch that and feed those questions to me as they come in. We will have a question and answer period at the end here. So again, my name is Mark Hagan. I am the Assistant Director of Education Abroad here at Appalachian State University. I have been doing this for, 15 years, I guess now. I worked at a community college. So for some of you who are currently at community colleges, I have a pretty good perspective of how international programming goes there and how to work with transfer students from community colleges when they come over to a university. And now my sensitive mouse is not working. Here we go. All right. So just a few statistics here for you. About 11% of all undergrads study abroad. 16%, and that includes community college students. About 16% of all students in baccalaureate programs study abroad. We'll be talking about the different types of study abroad programs, but 65% of a pretty healthy majority study on short-term programs. And about 67% of study abroad students are female. And so that is not a statistic that I am putting out there to discourage any of the males who want to study abroad. Is something that we in the field are really trying to work hard on to try to get more male participation in study abroad. So I usually, when I do this live, I like to ask a question about the benefits of studying abroad, but I don't know that this is going to work today. Here's the answers that I normally get from students. So one of the benefits of studying abroad is investing in yourself. You get an international perspective on your major. It's a whole lot different when you take a class in another country compared to taking a class back on your campus. It's an opportunity for you to make a change in the world. It starts with a change in your own attitude, your worldview, and then many of our students go on to work in fields where they can actually make a difference in the world. You can make friends. I hear back from returned students all the time, and they tell me that they have lifelong friendships as a result of their study abroad experiences. For any of you who are wanting to study a language or perfect your language skills, it's the best way to do it. That does not mean that you have to learn a language when you're studying abroad, but it just means that if you really want to work on that language, studying in a country where that language is primary language is the best thing to do. And if you're not having fun on study abroad, you're doing something wrong. So we want you to have fun, but obviously this is an academic experience. And so we want you to consider how much fun you have and compare it to what you would be doing on campus here. So travel when you're studying abroad. Make those friendships, as I mentioned before. Take part in cultural activities within your host country and really enjoy yourself, because that's one way that you're going to learn a lot about your host country. A few more stats here. 97% of students who studied abroad report that they got a job within 12 months. Compare that to about 49% of all college graduates who get their first job within 12 months. And so studying abroad gives an edge up to those students in the job market. If you're planning on going on to graduate school, 90% of study abroad returnees report that they got their first or second choice of graduate school. So it's definitely something that looks good on that application. 80% of study abroad alum report that they are better prepared for their jobs, and 70% say that they have greater job satisfaction. The top fields, you can basically study anything that you want to. And I think this is something that a lot of students find surprising. If you're in the STEM fields, 25.6% of the students studying abroad are in the STEM fields, actually more than business students. But again, it is something that there are very few majors that we have challenges with. If you're a nursing student, we need you to talk to us as early as possible in this process. And there's a few other majors that are a little bit more challenging, but for the most part, anyone can study abroad. Top destinations, no surprise here, but over half of all students going abroad go to Europe, and about 14% study in Latin America. Oceania is, it looks like a small number, but we do send a lot of students to Australia and New Zealand. And so even though that's 4.4, it is a significant number of our students who go abroad. And top destinations, this changes from year to year. All of these statistics, by the way, are pre-COVID. So we really don't have a good handle on where these statistics are going to end up for the 2019-2020 school year. Certainly for 2020 and 2021, it's going to be next to zero. But top destinations normally, United Kingdom, Italy, Spain are the top. English-speaking countries, a lot of students gravitate towards them. A lot of students want to go to Japan and perfect their Japanese skills. And so there's a lot of different opportunities for you. But I am someone that when I'm advising students, I really like to have students consider going to non-traditional destinations. And so I've just listed a few of them here. Students often gravitate towards English-speaking countries because they feel like if they don't speak a foreign language, they can't study abroad, and that's just simply not true. One of the, I think, most underrated destinations that we have is Poland. Here at App, we have a partner in Poland that teaches all of its classes in English. You do not need to know any Polish before you go. I do recommend that if you're going to a country where English is not the dominant language, that you learn some survival language, some survival vocabulary and phrases. But in certain countries, you can study without ever learning much more than those survival phrases. And so, again, Poland is a great opportunity for you. Vietnam. There are some other countries on here. Ghana is an English-speaking country. Most of the country is English-speaking, but it's not a destination that a lot of students choose. The other reason that I like to emphasize the non-traditional destinations is when you are out in the job market someday and you're having that interview, if you look back on this slide that 2 slides ago where I said 55% of the students go to Europe, during your job interview, if you say I studied abroad in the United Kingdom or France or Spain or something like that, so do half of all of the students. But if you say that you studied in Morocco or Tanzania or the UAE or something like that, it really allows you to have, I think, a very interesting and compelling story to tell the person who you're interviewing with. And so I think this really can enhance your chances of getting a job. Types of programs, excuse me. At App here, this is how we categorize them. Most other institutions in North Carolina categorize them similarly to this. They may use slightly different names, but an exchange program I think that makes sense to most people. Exchange means typically that one student is coming from abroad from that institution and you would be going to that institution. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 and you really don't have to worry about the math. That's something that we take care of internally and figure out how many students we can receive and how many we can send. But that's essentially what an exchange is. What we call an affiliate here is non-exchange programs. So studying abroad, for example, we've got an institution in Italy called Lorenzo de' Medici that a lot of institutions around the United States send their students to Lorenzo de' Medici. And it's not an exchange type of setup for us. You pay whatever their fees are. But it is an option that our students have for studying in a non-exchange type of a setting. Faculty-led, that's what I oversee, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but faculty-led essentially means that you are taking classes that are taught by our faculty. They are classes that appear in our catalog for the most part. You would be studying with students some of whom you may already be going to class with. The number of courses that are offered are very limited in these. Faculty-led tend to be short-term compared to exchanges and affiliates where you're spending a semester or even a year abroad. Faculty-led will probably be somewhere between 10 days up to 4 or in a few cases even 6 weeks long. And then of course, during the time of COVID here, we've had to look at virtual programs. And I know a lot of students are disappointed when they hear about virtual programs. They obviously want to go abroad. I understand that, and our goal is to get our students back abroad. But virtual programming is something that I think long-term is going to survive because it's a way that students who otherwise are not able to travel for a variety of reasons. Perhaps it's economic reasons, perhaps it's mobility reasons, but virtual programming is becoming very popular. Virtual internships are also a popular way to get some exposure working for a company that is based abroad while actually not traveling to that country. And then whoops, wrong way here, here we go. So non-traditional types of programs, you can do your internships abroad. Some universities, including Appalachian State, allow students to do international student teaching abroad. So you would do your student teaching 5 weeks here in North Carolina, 5 weeks abroad, and then 5 weeks back in North Carolina. Most institutions will offer an opportunity for their students to do independent research, and many institutions offer service learning opportunities. These are generally short-term types of travel. Sometimes service learning is built into a semester-long or even year-long experience as well. So some common questions. I'm kind of breezing through this very quickly here, but common questions that students have is, what about the cost? Can I afford to go abroad? And the cost varies quite a bit. If you are studying abroad on an exchange, the way we handle it here at App, you would be paying, if you're an in-state student, you'd be paying in-state tuition. In many cases, you'd be paying App State room and board as well. In other cases, room or board are not included, and you'd have to pay those directly to the institution that you're going to. Affiliates, those are structured differently. That is, there's a price tag to that, and so you pay whatever it is that they charge. Many affiliates are quite expensive, and so a lot of times our out-of-state students find affiliates to be more affordable for them, whereas in-state students, it might not be quite as accessible. But there are exceptions to that. Some institutions, for example, I mentioned Lorenzo de' Medici before, it is more expensive than normal North Carolina tuition, room and board, but it's not outrageously expensive, and that's why it's such a popular destination for our students. There's a school in Costa Rica called Veritas, and same thing. It's actually, in many cases, a little bit less expensive than the normal tuition, room and board in the state of North Carolina. Faculty-led programs are structured very differently. Faculty-led, you are traveling with as I mentioned before, a group of students from your particular institution. You're traveling with your faculty. You are probably going to be staying in hotels, and I'll talk about housing in just a moment, but with faculty-led, you're probably staying in hotels. In some cases, you may be staying in hostels. If you're not familiar with hostels, they're large locations where you've got 6, 8, 10, 16 students, usually because they cater to the younger crowd, but a bunch of people all staying in the same room, and then usually shared bathrooms and that type of thing. But they're a very economical way for students to travel. And so our faculty-led programs often make use of hostels as well. But faculty-led, then you're with those students for the entire time that you are traveling. Yes, you do have some free time that you can take advantage of. Sometimes weekends are free, or evenings, usually you'll have some free time, but for the most part, all of the activities during the day are going to take place with the same group of people that you travel to that country with. Courses, so if you're considering going abroad for a semester or a year, you will be taking classes at that particular host institution, and you need to get approval for those courses ahead of time. It actually goes through generally the transfer services office on your campus. The classes are not going to be the same things as you'll find in your catalog. So for example, you maybe will take Economics 101 while you're abroad. And it's not going to be exactly like Economics 101 at your home institution, but in most instances, the chairs of the departments will approve taking a class like that. Or maybe you're taking something that's a little bit more unusual. For example, I keep using economics as the example here, but maybe you're taking a course in the economics of the European community, for example, and we may not offer a course on our campus like that, but oftentimes we're able to get students credit for those types of courses. It might be elective credit, it might be gen ed credit. There's a number of different ways that we can get credit for students, or maybe we're just substituting it for something that we offer on our campus. With faculty-led programs, you're limited to whatever courses that the faculty are teaching. And generally, for faculty-led programs that run during, say, the winter or spring break, you would be probably taking 3 credits worth of classes. During the summer, it's typical to take 6 credits, although we do have some that are 3 credits and a few that are 9 credits. But you don't have much of a choice. Maybe there's 4 different classes and you have to choose 2 of them, but it's not like choosing out of a foreign institution's catalog. A lot of students ask about meals. Meals are sometimes included, sometimes not included. For our exchanges and our affiliates, you are at a foreign institution, and many times those institutions do not have the same type of meal facilities that we do here in the United States. They often don't have meal plans. So you might find something like a food court on campus, or you may just simply have to do grocery shopping and do your cooking in your dorm or apartment, or eat out in the local community. And so it really all depends on the type of housing that you choose. Students with special diets, I bring this up because this is something that if you don't bring this up early with us, it's something that can cause issues later on. But there are some places where special diets cannot be accommodated very easily. So if you are vegan or vegetarian, or if you follow a strict halal or kosher diet, you want to have a conversation with us, with your advisor. And we may have to have a conversation with the host institution to see how readily available these kinds of dietary needs can be met. I have had students who have been strict vegans and vegetarians who have I had one about a year or so ago who was going to Argentina, and she said, you know what, I'm just going to get used to eating meat for the time that I'm there, because she knew that Argentina is a very, very meat-based country. And so it was just something that Oops, I'm sorry. Can you still see my screen? Okay, I think is my screen back? It just disappeared on my computer.
We can still see it.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. Okay, so anyway, please do talk to your advisors about those types of needs that you may have. Housing, students are always asking questions about what type of housing, and housing can vary anywhere from homestays, living with a family, or many times homestay is just for some reason, widows like to gravitate to homestays. I think that it's a way that they can earn a little extra money now that that they're widowed and their children are grown up. But sometimes a homestay is a typical family, a mom and a dad and a couple of children maybe. If you are studying a language, this is a perfect way to learn the language. There are homestays in places where the language is not taught. For example, the one that I mentioned, Lorenzo de' Medici in Italy, only offers homestays. And since there's no requirement that a student know Italian before they go abroad, you're going to be with an Italian family, and they'll probably teach you some Italian, and you'll probably help them learn some English or perfect their English. But this is a great way, whether you can speak the language or not, it's a great way to learn about the culture. Generally, meals are included, 2 meals a day. Sometimes weekends are included, sometimes they're not. It all depends on the type of a program. But imagine going to Italy and having a home-cooked Italian meal, which is probably nothing anywhere close to what Olive Garden offers you. Other types of housing include student housing on campus, so similar to our dormitories. There may be apartments on campus or near campus, or you may have to stay in an apartment that is a few miles away from the campus. Sometimes you have a choice as to the type of housing that you can stay in. In other cases, there is not a choice. But my recommendation is, whenever possible, select a homestay. My daughter will talk a little bit about that later on when she talks about her experience in Brazil. For the student housing and apartments, again, it might be you have to go out to the grocery store and you have to do your shopping and then come back and do your cooking back home. Funding a study abroad program. So this is obviously a big question for students. Can I use my financial aid? And the good news is, yes, most financial aid can be applied to any type of a study abroad program. There are a few exceptions to that, but for the most part, you will be able to use your financial aid. The recommendation is to have a conversation very early on with your financial aid advisor. Tell them that you want to go abroad, especially if you want to do something like a faculty-led program during the summer. You have to make sure that you stretch your financial aid out throughout the fall and spring semesters and have enough left over to help supplement the cost of the summer program. Scholarships. There are a lot of scholarships. There are some very competitive scholarships. And so I definitely recommend to students take a look at scholarships early on. The international offices in universities all across the country often offer, almost always offer some sort of a scholarship. Here at App, we offer anywhere from $250 up to $2,000 for our scholarship program. Obviously, not everyone will win one. It is competitive, but that's a great place to start. Departments often offer scholarships as well. I will tell you that business colleges tend to have the deepest pockets, but I've heard of biology scholarships. We've had some scholarships in communication at our institution, but that's another place that you should start and look at. And then there are a number of very prominent national scholarships. If you are a Pell Grant recipient, I would encourage you to look at the Gilman Scholarship. That will pay, kind of lost touch of this, but I think it'll pay up to $5,000 if you're awarded a Gilman Scholarship. So that's a considerable amount of money that you can earn. There is the Boren Scholarship, which is geared more towards the STEM fields. And then there's a critical language scholarship. Those are the big three scholarships that pay the most, and really are very prestigious if you win those. And so I would definitely look at those as well. Health and safety. So we take health and safety very seriously. And I don't mean just at App, I mean my colleagues around the country. Health and safety is top of mind for us. Here in the state of North Carolina, we require, the state requires that we provide insurance for every student who is studying abroad, whether it's on a faculty-led program or a semester or a year program. And we go through a company called GeoBlue, which is owned by Blue Cross Blue Shield. My daughter went to the University of Texas, and she did some volunteer work before and after her study abroad program, which she wasn't insured for. So I set her up on the GeoBlue plan, and it worked really well for her. Unfortunately, she did have to use it, but rest assured that if you do have to use the insurance, you don't have to pay anything other than the premium for that. There are no deductibles. You can go to any doctor or clinic. Sometimes you will have to pay out of pocket for your doctor fees, and then get reimbursed later on. But most of you probably know that medicine in the United States is far more expensive than in other countries. And so if you're told that you have to pay out of pocket, you might pay $30 or $100 or something like that for something that would cost thousands of dollars here. But it's an excellent insurance, and you can rest assured that you will be well taken care of. We do country assessments before we allow students to go abroad. And so we look at what the Department of State has rated each country. And the Department of State uses a scale of 1 to 4, and we will not let students go to countries that are rated a 4. If a student wants to go to a country that's rated a 3, which basically a 3 says that travel is not recommended, but we will allow it if a student can make a case for why they need to study in that particular country, where they will be in that country. They've done their own assessment of the safety in that particular region, and then they go through an appeal process. So that's what we do here at App. It's a very similar process at most other institutions as well. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, of course, we all know that over the last year, but we have always looked at how the CDC rates countries, and they have a 1, 2, 3 scale. So, and actually it's not called 0, but they may not assign a number to many countries, but 3 would be something like Ebola, for example, and we will not let a student go to a country where Ebola is endemic. But we are watching these things on a daily basis. Everybody in my field, we get notifications on our phones about what's going on in the world. We watch the news. We know when there's a terrorist bombing or a breakout of some sort of a disease. And again, we're talking about prior to COVID, but we're constantly watching what's going on. And we will make decisions overnight if we have to about the safety of a particular country. And we have, in a few instances, had to bring students home. Of course, last year we had to bring many students home due to COVID, but in other situations, we've had to bring students home due to very fluid and changing and dangerous situations in country. So COVID, as probably most of you know, most universities, nearly all universities, canceled any sort of study abroad last fall. Most canceled it for this spring. Many have canceled for the summer. A few are allowing study abroad in certain countries in the summer. Here at App, we have actually canceled all of our study abroad through the summer. But we have our eyes on fall. We think that we'll be able to start sending students back in the fall. This could change. I just heard on the news last night that much of Europe is going into a 3rd lockdown. They're closing their borders again if they haven't already closed their borders to foreigners. And so These are some of the considerations that I and my colleagues around the country are making as we look at the situation and determine whether or not we can safely send students abroad. I was asked last night, do we take into consideration vaccines? And that's something that there's a lot of talk in our field, whether we will require vaccines. We probably will not, because it protects you. It doesn't protect the people that you're interacting with. So unless a host country requires a vaccine, we probably will not require vaccines to allow you to travel abroad. But again, we're watching the situation. I think for the fall, what we will end up doing is not canceling everything, but we may cancel country by country. For example, right now, we're not taking applications for students who want to go to Australia and New Zealand because those two countries are completely closed to US citizens and students. But rest assured that we are on top of this situation. So let's see, now is the time that I get to turn this over to my daughter, and we'll make this very interactive. I've prompted Kristen with a few questions. I'll have her start out with a little bit of an overview of her experience while she studied abroad. And if any of you have any questions about the study abroad experience, what it's like from a student's perspective, please feel free to ask Kristen.
Thank you. So as you mentioned, my name is Kristen Hagen. I did do a study abroad program in Brazil, and I was originally in Salvador, Bahia. And it was a faculty-led program. So the program was 6 weeks long, and originally I was against a faculty-led program, and I actually wanted to spend a year abroad. I wanted to do one semester in Jordan and one semester in Spain. And I wanted to do not the faculty-led, not the exchange. What was that one in between?
Affiliate
Program. I wanted to do that. And then because of some minor changes and timelines not working out, I ended up doing a faculty-led program, and I absolutely loved it. And I wish I had spent an entire year there. But the reason why I chose my specific program is because originally I was studying Arabic, and then because of classes being filled and I was trying to graduate early, I wasn't able to continue with that. So then the next language I chose was Portuguese. And once I chose that language, then of course I wanted to study abroad in Brazil so I could really learn the language in a different way. So that's why I chose my program. And it was, like I said, a little 6-week program, and it also had a service learning component, which he went over earlier. And for my specific program, that meant volunteering at a non-governmental organization and doing like a little community project. And then I also lived with a host family, and my homestay was just one older woman who was divorced and was hosting students for I think about 10 years. And so she was really well seasoned, and she was a really great host mom. And that's also something that I wasn't wanting, and I ended up being super, super happy with that, because it is just a completely different experience. And I'm glad that I did, 1, the faculty-led program, and 2, the homestay, because I don't think that my experience would have been anything what it was if I had chosen to do something else. But yeah, that's just a little overall explanation. I do have some other questions prepared if you wanted me to go over them, or if you wanted, okay. So let's see, why did I want to study abroad? I was always around that because of my dad. He would often travel for work. He loved traveling. And so I was always around that influence to travel, and, combining school with travel just really excited me and was something that I wanted to do. So once I got to high school and, I had some older friends who were in college, thanks to my sister. And then, starting to understand what my dad was doing, then that's when I really decided, okay, this that I'm going to do when I'm in college and have that opportunity. And so high school was when I really started to think about it. College is, of course, when I got really serious about it. My first 2 years of school, I went to a community college here in San Antonio, and I couldn't study abroad then. So I knew that I would study abroad with the university that I transferred to. So once I got to the University of Texas in Austin is when I started going to the international office and speaking with the advisors there, seeing what my options were, and really diving into it. And then, like I said, I chose my study abroad program because of the language. And honestly, I wouldn't have cared where I went or what I did, but at that time, because I was studying Portuguese, I really wanted to make my study abroad program most effective for me personally. And that was to really excel in the language, be immersed in the culture, and get as much practice as I could have gotten. And it was great. At the beginning of the presentation, one of the benefits that was mentioned was that cultural immersion, and it really is a thing. Like, you're immersed in a completely different culture, and if you're going to study a language, it is a game changer. I mean, I studied Portuguese, I think, for a year and a half before my program, and in 6 weeks of doing that program in Brazil, I felt like I went from a novice to a fluent student who could have sounded like she was a native. Even my dad was really surprised when he went to go visit me. He was like, wow, you become really fluent. And it was amazing. It really, really changes how you study and practice your language. And so that was a really big thing for me. And I mean, aside from studying and using my Portuguese, I got so much more from it. Especially being in a homestay and living with a host mother. I often thought about this, if I was on my own in an apartment like I originally wanted to be, I probably would have gone to the market and bought the normal groceries that I was used to, cooked my normal meals, maybe eggs with toast, and tried to see if they had some sort of bacon and orange juice, right? But because I lived with a homestay, I was just introduced to so many different foods. I had the typical Brazilian breakfast, typical Brazilian lunch, dinner, and so on. I woke up and did the usual, let's say, chores that others would do, like go on the weekend, go with my host mother to market, go and meet with her friends, do that sort of thing. So I really, really got a lot from the experience as far as cultural immersion goes, and definitely got a new perspective on how things work in Brazil in particular. So I absolutely loved my study abroad experience.
Thank you, Kristen. Are there any questions that anybody has? Are we just covering this so well that we covered everything that you needed to know? There are a few things that I didn't mention. So if there's a question, please interrupt me here, but a few things that I didn't mention that I realize now. Choosing a program. So Kristen talked a little bit about how she chose her program. I get students coming into my office asking me, where should I go? And my answer is, I don't know. Where do you want to go? And I'm very serious about that. I'm not trying to be flippant, but I probe with the students what it is that they want to do, what they want to learn, what their career goals are. One of the things that comes up often in conversation is I have a lot of students. I'm a near native speaker of Spanish, Mexican Spanish. And so a lot of the students that are interested in learning Spanish are sent to my office. But when I have a student that comes in and says, I want to be a social worker and I want to work with Spanish speakers in the United States, but I want to study abroad in Spain, I'm not going to stop them from studying abroad in Spain, but I'm going to have a conversation with them and say, have you thought about Mexico or Costa Rica? Have you thought about studying in a place where you will learn the dialect that is closer to what is spoken in the United States? I've had other students say, I want to go to the United Kingdom because I don't speak any English. I mean, I only speak English. I don't speak another language. And so, as I mentioned before, we've got other opportunities. If you really want to stay in an English-speaking country, there's South Africa, there's Ghana, there's a number of other places where you can study in English without having to worry about a foreign language. Students, especially transfer students, ask, when should I start doing my planning? And the answer to that question is as soon as possible. So you heard Kristen say that when she got to the university that she immediately went to the international office there. Whatever university you end up going to, please open that dialogue with the folks in the international offices, because the sooner you do your planning, the better off you're going to be. If you leave it to the end and you want to go abroad as a senior, it's going to be a lot more challenging. And it's more challenging because there are fewer classes that you can take as a senior, because now you're working on your upper level major and minor classes. And a lot of times you can't substitute the classes that you're taking, the classes that are available abroad, you can't substitute for your major and minor requirements. And so it's really important to consider going earlier on if possible. Your general advisors also do a great job of mapping things out for you. So have that conversation with them too. Say, I want to go abroad. And what do you recommend that I take ahead of time? What should I take on campus? What should I leave to take when I go abroad? Gen eds are a great example. Electives as well are the types of classes that you want to save for your study abroad experience. So start that planning early. I did mention financial aid earlier. That too is something you need to have that conversation early on so that you make sure that you have saved appropriately for your study abroad experience.
Mark, we do have a question in the chat from Alexis, if you don't care to take a look.
Yeah, so music industry, but also novice Spanish. Okay. Okay, so Alexis, I'm going to have you turn on your mic if you don't mind. What do you mean by what is the difference between majoring in the language versus learning on your own?
Yeah, so basically like getting a tutor versus actually studying it at.
Okay, the answer to that is, there's really not an answer to that. If you want to study that language, go to a country where that language is the predominant language, and you want to take classes in that language, you will have to take a placement test. So we can do a placement test on our campus. Any university should be able to do some sort of a placement test. But the host institution will also probably do a placement test to see what your language level is. If learning with a tutor is working for you, by all means, do that. But I will say I've been working towards a master's degree in Spanish here at App, and I'm very familiar with our faculty. They're fantastic. Most are native speakers of the language. We've got a few non-native speakers who are near native. And so there's some advantage to having a variety of faculty with different dialects, different perspectives on the language. But again, if tutoring is working for you, by all means, consider that. Okay, yeah, so I see the rest of that where you say it would be a better fit for you. One thing I would say though, for language learners, and this goes for any of you, no matter what language it is that you're studying, I say this from personal experience. When I made the decision many years ago to study abroad in Mexico, my Spanish was intermediate high, I would say, at the time. We didn't have the same classifications back then as we do now, but I would consider it intermediate high. And I decided that I wanted to load up on a whole bunch of Spanish classes at my university before going to Mexico. And it was the best decision that I made, because when I got to Mexico, excuse me, and I was able to perfect my language rather than learn the language in country. And so I think that's something too that you want to consider. Part of the answer depends on how you intend to use Spanish in the future. If it's just for fun, a tutor's great. Take a few classes when you're abroad. But if you want to major in the language or minor in the language and actually use it on the job, then I would probably recommend that you take more courses on campus and prepare yourself for your experience abroad. Does that help you, Alexis?
Yeah, that all sounds great. I really appreciate you helping me with that. And I didn't know if like app had like tutoring that's available through campus.
I see Buffy. You go ahead, please, Buffy.
Yeah, I was just going to add a few things. We do have tutoring available. Also, a difference between, because you also mentioned music industry. And so I was going to say a difference between majoring in the foreign language and just studying it on your own is you're going to, if you complete the degree, that's going to be something that you're going to have, it's going to show. So when you go to apply for jobs, whether it be for, a foreign service or an FBI agency, you're going to have the credentials, whereas otherwise you would not have that. So I just thought I'd mention that. I could definitely see where learning a foreign language, if you're interested in the music industry, for example, marketing music or whatever format, would be very beneficial. So that, that is something that you could do. But yes, we do have tutoring. We have tutoring actually available online and on campus. So.
Thank you.
That's great. And you don't have to be like a student or anything, like a student in any of the Spanish classes or programs to receive tutoring, right?
Well, now for our tutoring services, that's part of the student fee. Are you looking for like online accessibility to learning a foreign language? Because there's multiple like websites for.
Yeah, I mean, I guess something that's like I want to master Spanish as best I can, but I want to do it like I don't want it to be like what's the word? Like I kind of want to do it at like a comfortable pace type of thing, and like kind of like where it's not super wooden, but I'm like still learning and having fun with it and all of that.
As a language learner myself, and maybe Kristen can chime in as well, but I would recommend really focusing more on taking it at the university level if you wish to become fluent. We do have, and I'm trying to talk in general terms here, not just at App, but here at App, we do have a few programs where you can get a minor in Spanish while you're abroad. And so you can take, well, you can't take all of the courses to complete the minor, but you can take most of the courses to complete the minor when you're abroad. So if you take a couple of classes in preparation for going abroad, you can finish it up when you're overseas. But I really think that formal is probably the best if you want to get to a mastery level of the language. But I would also definitely recommend that you study abroad in a country where that language is spoken. For music industry, I don't know what your idea is, but I think Spain would make a lot of sense. You would not be one of those students who I'd probably try to talk out of Spain, but that depends on what you want to do too. So, but I hope that helps you.
Yes, it definitely does. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, well, looks like we must have covered everything. So I guess I'll close up here, but I want to thank Kristen again I literally asked her at 10 o'clock last night, her time to do this. So I really appreciate her jumping in at the last minute. And Buffy, thank you for moderating this today and for your office for hosting this entire conference. And thank you to the three of you who joined us this morning. And I hope that you learned something. And if you do choose to come to App, we would love to see you in our office. We are still operating virtually. We do have virtual walk-in hours, and you can find that information on our website. But whatever institution that you go to, we hope that you will consider your study abroad options. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone.